What if 8 millimeters of steel, angled, riveted, praised in pamphlets, couldn't save you? Tonight, we chase a legend born in sand and smoke. 8 millimeters of steel? Rifles still killed the Sd.Kfz 222. If that title sounds impossible, stay with me. Because the moment when a British rifle round met German armor in the Western Desert didn't just punch a hole in a vehicle, it punctured a belief. Picture a pale dawn over wind-carved dunes. A captured German scout car idles behind British lines, its facets catching the light like a cut gem. A handful of mechanics, a box of ammunition, and one simple question. How tough is 8 millimeters, really? Before we fire a single shot in this story, we rewind. Back to the choices that made a sleek machine fast enough to disappear, but not always strong enough to survive. And as we peel back those choices, ask yourself, if you had to bet a life on speed or protection, which would you choose, and why? Tell me in the comments, and let's find out whose instincts match history. The Sd.Kfz 222 didn't start as a myth. It started as a loophole. After Versailles, Germany wasn't supposed to build tanks, but armored cars? The treaty language left room to maneuver, and so the Reichswehr, and later the Wehrmacht, groped toward a substitute, a vehicle that could scout ahead, sniff out threats, and race home with the bad news, before the bad news caught it. Reconnaissance first, fighting, ideally, never. That doctrine did something decisive to the blueprint. It put speed and agility at the top of the page and pushed armor down into the margins. The result looked modern even before the war began, a squat diamond of sloped plates, all hard edges and intent. Beneath, a modified Horch 801 automotive heart with four-wheel drive, and this felt like magic the first time you saw it. Four-wheel steering, tight alleys, sudden reverses, hairpin pivots in a village lane or a desert wadi. The 222 could dance. Drivers were warned to use the four-wheel steer gently at low speeds, but when used right, it made the car feel nimble in places that stopped lumbering machines cold. Now climb into the crew spaces, you'll hear the idle rise and fall through an open-top turret under a wire mesh screen. Light enough to lift, clever enough to slap aside a dropped grenade. Two up top, commander and gunner shoulder to shoulder, one down front. The driver peering through an armored slit that turns the world into a narrow theater. It's cramped, but not sloppy. German industry put care into this. The weld seems neat, the castings crisp, the linkages smooth. Reliability mattered to crews who lived or died on weather engines. Turned over the second time, not the third. Armament? A 20mm autocannon for reach and bite, paired with a 7.92 mm machine gun for suppression. Early cars carried the MG-13, soon replaced by the new darling of German infantry, the MG-34. The main gun evolved too, from the KWK-30 to the faster-firing KWK-38, adding sting and rate of fire that, against soft targets, felt more than enough. Against lightly armored vehicles or low-flying aircraft caught too close, a burst of 20mm could be decisive. For a recon car, this was a sharp set of teeth. But if the weapons were the teeth, the armor was the skin. And here's where our title begins to haunt the story. The early 222 wore 8mm of rolled steel almost everywhere, with 5mm protecting underbelly and rear deck, the places men hope the enemy won't shoot. 8mm doesn't sound like much because it isn't. You can stack a few credit cards and start to imagine it. The engineers angled those thin plates aggressively to make bullets glance and time stretch. More steel to pass through on a slant, more chances to ricochet. It was the classic trade. Keep weight down, keep speed up, let geometry do the work. When war came to Poland in September 1939, the trade looked brilliant. The 222 ran free. It scouted fast roads, slipped through gaps, sowed confusion in places that weren't ready for it. In France, May 1940, it did the same, screening for panzer spearheads, darting forward to find bridges and weak seams, then vanishing before heavier opposition arrived. Against disorganized troops or thinly equipped units, 8mm was enough because speed kept the 222 out of the kind of trouble armor solves. If you only skim the surface of those campaigns, you could come away convinced. This is what reconnaissance should look like. The Balkans in April 1941 reinforced the lesson. Narrow lanes, steep terrain, mixed quality opposition. Again, speed plus surprise carried the day. Crews came home with a kind of faith, not in invincibility. No one who rides to the front in a light armored car believes that, but in adequacy, adequate protection, adequate for the role, adequate to get out of a scrape you never meant to get into. Then the Mediterranean shifted like a stage set, and the western desert rolled into view. February 1941. New theater, new conditions, new opponent with more time in the sand. British and Commonwealth troops had been fighting there since Italy's entry into the war. They had learned the terrain, adjusted tactics, and stock tools fit for that wide-open arena. North Africa is a study in exposure. The spaces are huge, the cover scarce, the sight lines long. If your plan relies on staying unseen, the desert will test it. If your armor is thin, the desert may find out. The Afrika Korps arrived with its eyes, the reconnaissance battalions, out front. The 222, in its element on firm desert crust, popped over ridges, raced along wadis, and traced the outlines of British positions like a pencil sketch. Early on, the pattern looked familiar. Speed in, observation, speed out. A well-driven 222 could be there and gone before a counterstroke found it. The radio crackled, the headquarters map shifted, and the line of advance moved with fresh confidence. In photographs from that first autumn, the 222s are small, tilted diamonds etched against an ocean of sand. Vehicles designed to be seen as a hint, not a threat. But there is a second pattern in desert war. The fluidity that makes reconnaissance essential also makes losses and captures common. Vehicles run dry and get left. A breakdown that would mean an hour by the roadside in France becomes a strategic problem in Libya. Engagements push back and forth across the same ground in days, sometimes hours, and what you abandon in one direction you might find again coming the other way. That is how British workshops filled with Axis machines, some knocked out, others simply stranded, many reparable, all curious. The School of Tank Technology in Surrey would eventually study the 222 at leisure, but the desert was a lab with no patience. Before we open that lab notebook, take one more look at the design logic. German doctrine assumed reconnaissance units would observe, report, avoid. That assumption shaped everything. The weight budget favors the engine over the armor. The turret is open for visibility more than protection. The plates are thin but sloped. The steering systems are agile. The profile low. It's coherent, if the world plays along. But the world is under no obligation to respect doctrine. And as soon as opponents begin to point the right kind of ammunition at the right kind of target, a coherent plan can run into a hard fact. Crews knew the gap instinctively. They understood that 8mm and an open top were not a talisman. They were careful about angles. They avoided side-on exposure. They sprinted rather than lingered. And the factories responded. Mid-production, more frontal armor. Then later a proper 30mm. Front on some variants. But the flanks stayed thin for too many cars, too long. The fleet is what it is in the moment you need it, not what it might become on a drawing board months away. Meanwhile, British infantry were not the same as the infantry the 222 had faced in 1939. They did not only carry standard ball ammunition. They had armor-piercing rounds for full-power rifles. They had anti-tank rifles in service. And their training, shaped by hard fights and by a system that spread tactical intelligence quickly, taught them what to shoot, where to aim, and when to stand their ground. If you've heard field wisdom about shoot the angles or avoid dead-on shots, the 222's shape is the reason those sentences needed nuance. Angling helps, until it doesn't. Present the wrong plate, at the wrong moment, to the wrong shooter, and 8 stops being a number and becomes a hole. Now we arrive back at that dawn behind British lines, the captured car drawn up, the sand scuffed by boots. The first tests are almost playful, a way to calibrate intuitions. Sidearms first, the clack of a 9mm, the metal ringing, the plate dimpled but intact. Submachine gun bursts next, short, controlled, the range uncomfortably close. Marks appear, flakes of paint, maybe a bulge inside where Spall whispers a warning. So far, the armor behaves as promised against pistols and SMGs. No one would stand in front of either, but neither looks like a sure killer of thin steel. Then a rifle comes out of its case. A Lee-Enfield, the infantryman's old companion, its bolt throw smooth. Its sights familiar to any British soldier who drilled on ranges long before he smelled desert dust. The ammunition box is different this time. Black-tipped promise in brass and copper, a steel heart where softer lead would normally sleep. The shot will be taken at a plate that's not sloped toward the shooter. Flat matters. Impact angle matters. In this moment, the test is not of marksmanship or bravado. It's a question posed to physics and metallurgy. What does 8mm mean when the core is hard and the strike is right? Hold your breath with the men watching. The shooter sets his feet, breathes, presses. For the fraction after the crack, the desert is a diagram of forces. Muzzle energy, plate thickness, obliquity, the difference between a glancing kiss and a violent pass-through. If the title of this video is true, the answer will be written not in words but in the steel itself. And when those mechanics step forward, carefully, quietly, to read that answer with their fingers, the story of the Sd.Kfz 222 will tilt on its axis. Before we reveal what they saw, let's ground the machine one last time in the numbers that framed the gamble. Early production. 8mm on the sides, 5 on the underbelly and rear deck, angled plates everywhere to stretch effective thickness, mid-war adjustments, a thicker front on many cars, an improved main gun, a slightly more powerful V8 to carry the growing burden, top speed on roads close to 80 km/h, less in sand but still brisk enough to feel like safety if you could keep moving. Ammunition for the 20mm was never lavish. You carried enough for the mission, not for a drawn-out duel. And the crew, 3 humans in a hard shell, learned to read danger like weather, to see the telltale colors of a fight they were not meant to join and turn away before the sky broke. You can respect the engineering and still question the wager. If the doctrine had been obeyed perfectly, the car would have been a silhouette in binoculars, a ghost on the edge of vision, and never a target at rifle distance. But doctrine, phrase in contact with reality. Reconnaissance isn't done on a whiteboard. It's done where visibility is good for both sides. And the moment a 222 had to cross a stretch of open ground within a few hundred meters of an alert infantryman with the right cartridges, the design conversation between speed and armor became a verdict. Think of how trust feels from inside a steel shell. The driver trusts that the engine won't cough at the wrong moment. The commander trusts that the turret gives him the view he needs to keep his men alive. The gunner trusts that when he squeezes the trigger, the cannon speaks cleanly and stops men from getting too close. All 3 trust that the plates around them will at least turn bullets into bruises, will turn certainty into chance. It is a particular kind of heartbreak for soldiers to learn that a creed they were taught, "This is enough," was sometimes wrong. That is the human core of our title. The thing you can still feel if you stand next to one of these vehicles in a museum and lay a hand on the armor. You can measure 8mm with a ruler. You measure the consequences with names. Across 1939 and 1940, the 222 successes built a powerful inertia. After campaigns that ended quickly and decisively, confidence calcified into culture. Propaganda posters showed bullets deflecting. Training films stressed the benefits of slope and speed, and crews believed what they were told because belief is part of doing a job this dangerous. And let's be fair, those claims weren't lies in every context. Against pistols and submachine guns, against glancing rifle hits at longer ranges, the armor did what it was supposed to do. The difference between usually enough and never enough is measured in specifics: caliber, range, angle, ammunition type. If you take nothing else from this first chapter, take this: battlefield truth lives in the details. The desert supplied those details in abundance. Long sightlines punished side exposure. Open flanks meant the 222 often showed its weakest plates to the worst threats. And the British habit of testing what they captured, first in the field, then in the lab, turned hunches into checklists and checklists into training. Lessons did not stay secrets. They moved through units, across services, and outward through Commonwealth allies. That is how a vulnerability becomes common knowledge, not by rumor, but by repetition. We've set the stage, we've weighed the design, and we've stared down the barrel at 8mm of promise. In a moment, the rifle report you've been waiting for will answer the question that gives this video its name. Stay with me. And watch what happens when a number on a specification sheet meets a bullet with a purpose. The crack rolls away, and for a heartbeat nobody speaks. Then the crew steps forward, and the armor itself gives us the line that matters. A neat, round entry on the outside, a torn, ugly exit on the inside. 8mm didn't slow a hardened core enough. The promise of slope wasn't there on that flat side plate. The desert has a way of answering questions without speeches. One shot doesn't make a doctrine. So they shoot again. Different angles, slightly longer distances, the kind of variations soldiers care about, because combat is never laboratory perfect. The pattern holds. At close to moderate ranges, on plates that aren't steeply sloped, armor-piercing rifle rounds can defeat the 222's side. What had been a suspicion becomes a procedure, and procedures move faster than rumors. Word travels the way good fieldcraft always does. Quickly, quietly, with specifics. Infantry briefings highlight aim points and angles. Reconnaissance patrols learn to keep the car's nose pointed at the threat and never loiter side-on. Tankers are reminded that concentrated bursts can chew at a single spot, the way rain wears stone, especially at close distances. Anti-tank gunners are told to save expensive armor piercing for real armor, and use high explosive against thin plates like these. The lesson isn't that the Sd.Kfz 222 is fragile everywhere. It's that it's fragile somewhere. And on a battlefield, somewhere is enough. Now, step back and line up the facts that shaped this moment. Early 222s carried about 8mm on the sides and rear surfaces, with 5mm under and atop the rear deck. Later, some front plates thickened substantially, but the sides often stayed thin. The plates were sloped wherever possible to stretch effective thickness and encourage ricochet. That works, until the shot hits square, or the vehicle must turn, or terrain forces a bad presentation. In open country, presenting a perfect angle isn't always a choice. Sometimes the mission or the map decides for you. To British and Commonwealth troops, the discovery is empowering. Standard rifles aren't anti-tank guns, but issued armor-piercing ammunition exists for a reason. To answer thin armor, squad leaders begin to carry a pocket doctrine. If it's light, if it's close, if you have the right rounds, shoot. The big punchers, like the boys' anti-tank rifle and the 2-pounder gun, need no introduction. They were already more than enough. But the psychological shift belongs to the ordinary rifleman. Where once a scout car felt like a problem to be reported, it now feels like a target with conditions. Meet the conditions, solve the problem. The 222 still has teeth. Its 20mm autocannon is vicious against soft targets and lightly armored foes. The coaxial machine gun cuts lanes through dust and brush. Its speed is real. Its agility is more than brochure deep. Crews who keep their distance, manage angles, and refuse prolonged fights remain hard to pin. In the right hands, on the right day, the 222 is still a ghost on the horizon. But now both sides know what happens if the ghost has to cross within a couple hundred meters of a steady shooter with the right cartridges. The myth thins. Let's talk about the other killers you don't see in propaganda drawings. Overhead threats don't care about slope. An open top under a mesh screen gives wonderful visibility, but fragments from mortars and airbursts fall on everyone equally. Spall inside thin armor is insidious. Even without a full penetration, a hard strike can shear off flakes from the inner face and turn them into needles in a phone booth-sized crew space. Tires are another quiet vulnerability. Immobilize a scout car and you erase its best defense, forcing a crew to choose between bailing out and becoming a fixed target. Limited ammunition stowage means a drawn-out exchange burns your options quickly. Thin plates around fuel don't need many bad minutes to turn into fire. If you're thinking, so why did this car look like a winner in 1939 and 1940? That's the right question. The early campaigns rewarded speed, surprise, and coordination. The 222 was built to be first on the scene and first out again, against disorganized opposition without widespread armor-piercing issue. 8mm plus slope was usually enough. The Western Desert, by contrast, punishes the slow pivot, the lengthened exposure, the flat plate glimpsed at the wrong moment. And by 1941 to 42, British and Commonwealth forces had the ammunition, the training pathways, and the habit of testing captured equipment that turns a hunch into a manual page. The ripple spreads far beyond one workshop in the sand. Captured vehicles make their way to formal proving grounds. Calipers and notebooks replace hunches. Controlled shots follow the rough-and-ready field tests. Reports circulate, diagrams multiply, and the bullet points get shorter and sharper. Plate thicknesses, angles, engagement advice. Those notes don't stay in one army. Either, allies share what matters. A vulnerability discovered in Libya can show up as a tip in Tunisia, as a line in a briefing packet in Italy, as a training note on another front entirely. Meanwhile, the 222 story is not just a British story. To the east, Soviet engineers examine captured German scout cars, smaller predecessors, and the 222 itself, and absorb the lessons in metal. They're impressed by the geometric armor scheme. Many small facets set at sharp angles to push shots offline. They take that idea seriously in their own light armored car projects, then make the other choice that defines their wartime industry. Build simple, build many. The Soviet answer is lighter, cheaper, easier to manufacture. And if it isn't meant to duel, that's a design truth spoken out loud, not hidden under a sheen of optimism. Across the Atlantic, American ordnance officers bring a lab coat's discipline to the same questions. They put German plates in front of American bullets and jot down numbers soldiers can use, at reasonable ranges, with proper armor-piercing rounds and full-power rifles. Thin armor doesn't last. The exact figures shift with angle and quality of steel, but the takeaway rhymes with what the British found in the desert. It's not that every man with a rifle can crack every armored car. It's that light armor has always had a hard ceiling, and modern infantry carry the tools to touch it. None of this erases the 222's strengths. If you ride in one and do your job by the book, eyes open, range managed, angles respected, it is still a fine reconnaissance machine for a world that lets you observe without being observed. The problem is that war seldom grants perfect conditions. Roads funnel you. Terrain dictates turns. Contact happens at inconvenient ranges. And once troops on the other side are trained to see your shape and know your numbers, their reactions get faster and your margin for error shrinks. So what do you do if you're sitting in Berlin with stacks of field reports that all hum the same unsettling tune? You look for a new outline. You reach for thicker plates, more gun, more wheels to spread the weight, and hope your factories can keep up. The German answer will get a name that still draws a crowd today. A machine that finally balances speed with real protection for a reconnaissance role. But before we roll that newcomer onto the stage, stay with me inside the 222 for one more moment. Because the most important part of this story isn't a spec sheet. It's the people who trusted those specs. Imagine the commander's hand resting on an armor plate he could measure with his thumb and forefinger. Imagine the driver's eyes learning to count danger in angles and seconds. Imagine the gunner knowing that his best defense is to make someone else keep their head down first. These men did not go forward because they thought they were invulnerable. They went because they were told they were adequate, and because their job was to find out what waited over the next rise. When 8mm fails, it does not fail an idea. It fails a person. We're about to meet the German reconnaissance car that learned from this pain and tried to fix the numbers. More thickness where it matters. A bigger bite to keep threats polite at a distance. A chassis that kept the dance. It is an impressive answer. But answers arrive on timelines, and battlefields don't pause for production schedules. Before we unveil it, I want to show you how thoroughly the Allies wrote the 222's weaknesses into training. Where to aim, what to fire, how to survive the first seconds of an encounter. Those specifics turned fear into method, and method into confidence. If you were writing that training card, what's the first line you'd print in bold? Tell me in the comments. Then let's flip the card over together and read what the armies actually wrote. Flip the card. Here's what the briefing started to sound like. Simple, practical, survivable. Aim for the flats. Side plates in the rear are thin. Avoid steeply sloped faces when you can. If you have a choice of angle, pick the cleanest shot you can get. Use the right rounds. Full power rifles with armor-piercing ammunition are for light armor. If your section carries them, designate whose. Shooting AP before contact. Concentrate fire. Multiple strikes in one spot can crack what a single shot won't. Talk to each other. Call targets. Make the plate fail where it's weakest. Keep range realistic. Close to moderate distance is your friend against thin armor. Don't waste shots at extremes unless you have nothing to lose. Be Be flexible with weapons. Anti-tank rifles and 2-pounder guns will overmatch this target. Save scarce AP for heavier threats, and use high explosive where it makes sense. Tank cokes at close range can chew if it stays on one point. Mind the top. Open turrets hate fragments. Mortars and timed airbursts are not debates about armor. They're weather. Plan accordingly. Mobility is armor. Kill the tires and you erase the car's best defense. A stuck scout is a solved problem. And above all, do not let it choose the angle. Force it to turn. Make it show you the plate you want to see. Those aren't myths. They're the kind of specifics that roll through battalions and become. Reflex. Instructors sketch silhouettes on blackboards. Range officers set up steel at measured obliquities. Crews on both sides adjust. German drivers practice presenting a narrow front. Commanders preach speed over swagger. Gunners rehearse short, violent bursts and fast withdrawals. Everyone learns faster because the desert hands out instant feedback. The factories learn, too. Reports home translate into metal. Mid-production, frontal armor thickens. Later, some variants receive a proper 30 millimeters at the nose, a number that means something against rifle fire. The main gun's rate of fire improves. Engines gain a little muscle to carry the extra weight. These are good changes. They just aren't enough changes, not everywhere that matters, and not fast enough to rewrite the fleet already in the field. Most side plates remain 8 millimeters. The arithmetic of protection still collapses if you show the wrong surface at the wrong time. Meanwhile, the Allies institutionalize curiosity. Captured vehicles don't sit in yards. They go under calipers and into controlled tests. Field hunches become charts and chapters. The language in those documents is dry, but the effect is electric. Privates and corporals get the distillation of hard experience as bullet points they can act on tomorrow morning. That is how you turn fear into method, and once method exists, confidence follows. Across the lines, Soviet engineers pick up the thread with their own eyes and slide rules. They like the geometry, the many-faced hull that tries to trick bullets into glancing. They dislike the pretense that thin armor can be something it isn't. Their answer is brutally honest. A smaller car, fewer crew, light plates, and production lines that can stamp them out in thousands. It's not a dueling machine. It's a tool for a specific job, built by an industry making hard choices under pressure. If you've ever admired simplicity that knows what it is and doesn't apologize, you know the logic. In the United States, ordnance teams add lab rigor to the same question. Ranges are measured, angles are marked, ammunition is labeled, reports come back with tables soldiers can trust. The verdict aligns with the desert and with Moscow. Thin armor behaves like thin armor. Give infantry the right cartridges and the right distances, and the rifle you know becomes a key that opens a very particular door. So where does that leave the Sd.Kfz 222? Not useless. Not at all. In the hands of a careful crew, it remains what it was intended to be. A fast, agile scout that hates commitment. It can still be the first to know and the first to live to tell. But now the margins are fine. The mistakes are expensive, and the men inside know in their bones that the number on their side, 8, has conditions attached. For German planners, there's only one honest answer. Build the reconnaissance car the battlefield is actually asking for. That means real frontal protection, not a suggestion, but a shield. It means a gun that makes light armor and soft targets think twice at distance. It means the same grace in motion, the same road speed, but with weight spread across more wheels and a hull shape that keeps the nose strong while the flanks stop being invitations. When that answer finally arrives, it looks like a prophecy fulfilled, sleek, purposeful, and, at last, armored in a way that respects the realities the desert wrote in dust and smoke. Crews feel the difference the first time they stand in front of it and rap their knuckles against the plate. This is not usually enough. This is meant to be here. But even great answers have to beat the clock. Tooling up takes time. Strategic bombing eats factories. Raw materials tighten. The perfect machine is worthless until it exists in numbers, and numbers were the one thing Germany was running out of faster than anything else. The 222 keeps rolling because it must. The new car takes the stage too late to push the old one off. Before we roll that newcomer into the light, I want you to sit with a single image. A museum floor, quiet as a chapel. The little German scout car sits under spotlights. all facets and angles. Visitors run their hands along a side plate that feels shockingly thin when you measure it with your fingers. You can see the math now, not in a diagram, but in your palm. If you've ever wondered whether a title can be true, 8 millimeters of steel? Rifles still killed the Sd.Kfz 222-inch. You'll feel the answer under your skin. In a moment, we'll meet the replacement that tried to answer the desert's challenge. We'll place it beside its allied contemporaries. The British cars that leaned into armor and a bigger bite. The Soviet design that bet on numbers. And we'll ask the final question this story deserves. What would it have taken to make 8 millimeters enough? And why did history insist on a different ending? Roll the replacement onto the stage. 8 wheels on the ground. Weight spread like a dancer with sure footing. The hull is still a study in angles, but the face is different now. Thicker where it counts. This is the reconnaissance car that tries to answer the desert's exam with work shown in the margins. Real frontal armor, a gun that can speak with authority, and a chassis that keeps the speed crews love. You can see the lesson of the 222. Written into its bones, the nose no longer hopes. It intends. Stand beside it and compare the outlines. The new machine carries a 50 mm main gun that gives it reach and respect. The frontal plate is not an invitation. It's a boundary. The sides remain lighter. Every vehicle pays a weight tax somewhere. But the overall balance finally acknowledges the truth that sand and steel taught. Reconnaissance is done under observation, and sometimes under fire. Dual drivers at opposite ends mean the car can withdraw without turning. Because the seconds you save not swinging a nose around are seconds you might live to report. Now place it among its peers. British armored cars in the same era tell a different story. Thicker sides, a solid front, and that reliable 2-pounder that hits harder than most people think. These vehicles accept a touch less grace for a lot more stay in the fight. They are scouts that can brawl when cornered. The Soviet answer is starker. A small, angular hull, thin but honest. Plates, a 2-man crew, and the kind of parts-bin pragmatism that keeps lines moving. It's built for a war of distances and numbers, not duelist's pride. 3 philosophies, 3 honest readings of the same problem. Return to the 222 with this context, and the picture sharpens. It is the right tool for a brief moment in a certain kind of war. Fast, nimble, lightly armed, lightly armored. Then ammunition improves, training tightens, and theaters change. The tool doesn't become worthless. It becomes conditional. Used perfectly, it still shines. Used ordinarily, it courts risk. Used a little too boldly, it bleeds. And yet, crews kept climbing in. They angled their hulls like chess players setting the board. They learned routes that favored quick exits. They kept to the edges of fights, where information mattered more than armor, and they prayed to never have to cross an open flat within a rifle's honest distance. When improvements arrived, thicker fronts, faster firing cannon, a bit more engine, they took them gratefully. But war is a tide, and you can't rebuild every ship as the waves break. Allied testing didn't stop with a few field shots. Back in workshops and proving grounds, armor plates were measured with calipers, shot at measured obliquities, and written up in reports that turned into training. You can draw a straight line from a neat test hole in the desert to the diagrams that landed on a corporal's desk months later. Thickness tables, best aim circles, notes about what to save and what to spend in ammunition. That pipeline, from capture to chart, made soldiers dangerous in a disciplined way. Meanwhile, to understand how new lessons spread, look at a single, famous capture. In Tunisia, a heavy CAD is taken largely intact. Engineers crawl over it where it stands, then ship it to a British test center where months of careful probing turn awe into knowledge. That kind of institutional curiosity, applied to everything from behemoths to scout cars, is why vulnerabilities didn't stay local. Crews in one theater benefited from what a fitter discovered with a wrench and a notebook half a continent away. So, what would it have taken to make 8 millimeters enough? If you do the math, a modest increase on the sides, say to 12 or 15, would have raised the bar against rifle fire, especially at angles. But that adds weight. Weight demands a stronger engine and sturdier suspension. Those demand more fuel and more maintenance. Costs rise, production slows, and the car begins to drift out of the niche it was meant to fill. Fast, cheap, numerous enough to be eyes everywhere. That's the iron law behind the romance of armor. Every millimeter is a promise you must pay for, over and over, in factories and fuel convoys and workshops. There's also the trap of visibility. The 222's open-top turret is near perfect for seeing and commanding. It's also a skylight for fragments. A wire mesh helps against tossed grenades, but not against a timed detonation above your head, not against the invisible hail of spall kicked off by a hard strike. If you've ever wondered why some designs close the roof and shift to periscopes and vision blocks, this is why. Every window you open to the world is also a door the world can use. Let's talk. Psychology. Propaganda posters and training films taught crews to trust slope, to believe in speed, to feel protected enough to go forward. That wasn't manipulation so much as morale engineering. Soldiers who don't trust their machines hesitate, and hesitation kills. But when word returns from the front that rifles with the right rounds can kill you if you show the wrong plate at the wrong distance, doctrine must move with it. Good armies adjust not just their hardware, but their sentences. Avoid unnecessary combat becomes never present a flat side. Report contact becomes report contact from a hull-down angle if at all possible. Words turn into habits. Habits turn into survival. On the other side of the fight, confidence blooms. The ordinary rifleman learns that his black-tip cartridges are not talismans to be hoarded. They are tools to be used in specific circumstances. He learns to watch the geometry of a moving hull, to call out when the angle is right, to breathe and press and trust that the laws of physics are on his side. Confidence doesn't make men reckless. It makes them methodical, and method is what defeats mystique. Now, slide our story forward to the summation. We've watched the 222 excel, stumble, and adapt. We've seen the Allies turn curiosity into doctrine. We've met the sleeker, stronger answer that arrives late. We've weighed the arithmetic of thickness against the economy of speed. There's one more comparison left to make before we close the loop. Put the German Scout beside the British and Soviet contemporaries in the only metric that mattered to the men inside. What happens when something starts shooting back? The British cars lean into a different balance. Their side plates are stout enough that rifle fire, including armor-piercing, has a harder day at typical ranges. Their main guns are serious instruments, not warnings. They feel less nimble, more planted. You can hear it in cruise language. Not, we must avoid, but we can if we must. The Soviet car is the opposite. Smaller, cheaper, everywhere. It won't stand up in a prolonged scrape, but there are enough of them that reconnaissance becomes a blanket rather than a spotlight. In each case, the doctrine writes the design, and the design writes the odds. As for the 222, it survives by being used exactly as intended, and by being lucky. It thrives where roads are kind, where approaches are covered, where observation can be done at distance. It falters where exposure is long, where cover is sparse, where closing the gap is unavoidable. When you see one today in a museum, so much of that fate is visible in a glance. The crisp edges are not just aesthetics. They're an argument about bullets and angles. The thin plate is not just economy. It's a thesis about what a scout should risk. I want you to hold two truths at once. First, the Sd.Kfz 222 was a well-made machine that did its intended job brilliantly under the right conditions. Second, the battlefield does not always grant the conditions you intend. The Western Desert forced the question in the bluntest way possible, and the answer is the title you clicked. 8 millimeters of steel, no matter how cleverly arranged, could still be beaten by rifles when the shot was right. In our final chapter, we'll bring every thread together. The engineering trade-offs, the human cost, the late war fix, and the way museums and manuals preserve these lessons. Then we'll ask you to weigh in. If you had been on the design team, what would you have changed first? Armor, armament, or doctrine? Think on it. Then meet me at the end for the last word and a challenge I want every viewer to take seriously. Let's bring every thread together. At the heart of this story is a bargain. Trade armor for agility, trust slope over thickness, and let speed keep you safe. For a season, the Sd.Kfz 222 lived comfortably inside that bargain, in Poland and France, where surprise and tempo mattered more than duels at rifle distance. A light, nimble scout shone. In the Balkans, where terrain favored quick Movers and opposition was uneven. It shone again. But the Western Desert, with its long sight lines, thin cover, and better prepared enemy, asked a harder question, and the answer is written in our title. 8 millimeters of steel, no matter how elegantly angled, could still be beaten by rifles when the shot and the cartridge were right. Once that was proven, not by rumor, but by repeated tests, measured angles, and shared reports, the battlefield changed character. Infantry, who had once seen light, armored cars as problems to be deferred, now saw them as problems with conditions. Meet the conditions, solve the problem. Training cards were updated, aim points circled, ammunition set aside with intention rather than superstition. Confidence replaced mystique. On the other side of the hill, German crews adapted as well, turning best practice into habit. Never linger side on. Never trade angles for bravado. Never assume a slope can save a bad presentation. Survival became a choreography of seconds and degrees. The factories moved, but time moved faster. Frontal plates thickened on later runs. The 20mm cannon's cadence improved. Engines gained a little muscle to carry the extra burden. These were good changes, but the fleet in the field still wore the weaknesses of its birth certificate. Thin flanks, an open top that rewarded awareness but invited fragments, and an ammunition budget suited to reconnaissance, not brawls. Doctrine said, observe, report, avoid, and doctrine remained. The best armor a 222 could wear. Step sideways and look at the alternatives. British designers nudged the needle toward protection and punch, sturdier sides for the common threats. A main gun that could speak decisively when a scout car was forced to stand and be counted. Soviet designers embraced production honesty. Small, angular hulls stamped in numbers. Light plates that made no pretense of shrugging off what they could not. And a willingness to accept that reconnaissance is a net you cast. Across a front, not a duel you win with a single machine. Each choice tells the truth about different needs. Now, park the 222 beside the machine that tried to answer the desert outright. 8 wheels spread the weight. A 50mm gun gives reach and respect. Real frontal armor turns hope into confidence. Dual drivers let it leave a fight without showing a vulnerable side. It is, in so many ways, the reconnaissance car the battlefield had been asking for all along. But answers have calendars. Tooling, materials, bombing, priorities. These are not footnotes. They are the reasons a good solution can arrive in too few numbers, too late to erase what came before. So, what would have made 8 millimeters enough? Perhaps 12 or 15 millimeters on the flanks, a closed roof, a touch more engine, but follow the costs. More weight demands more power. More power demands stronger suspension and more fuel. More fuel and complexity demand more maintenance. Production slows. The vehicle drifts out of the light, fast, numerous niche it was built to fill. That is the iron law that outlives any single design. Every millimeter of armor is a promise you keep paying for, mile after mile, convoy after convoy. There's a broader lesson here, one that reaches past museums and manuals. Technology doesn't end debates, it reframes them. Slope won't rescue inadequate thickness from a direct, well-placed shot. Speed won't cancel exposure if the mission or the map forces you into the open. Visibility from an open turret won't compensate for fragments falling from the sky. Every advantage arrives with a cost. Every cost arrives with a risk, and soldiers live at the intersection, paying in attention and nerve for choices made years earlier on drafting tables. If you want to feel that equation in your hands, visit a preserved vehicle, stand under the lights, lay your palm on a side plate that measures in millimeters rather than inches, and imagine trusting it with your life. The welds are neat. The geometry is clever. The machine is well made. But the truth in steel is still the truth. A rifleman with the right cartridge, at the right angle, at the wrong moment for you, can write an ending you can't outrun. And yet, it would be wrong to dismiss the Sd.Kfz 222 as a failure. Under the conditions it was designed for, it excelled. Fast, reliable, mechanically elegant, and perfectly suited to bring commanders what they needed most. Information. The flaw was not a single plate or a single weld. It was a belief that the world would conform to doctrine. The Western Desert did not. It handed down a harsher curriculum and forced every army to rewrite parts of its book. That is why this story endures. It's not just about a scout car or a rifle cartridge. It's about how quickly armies learn, how well factories listen, and how honestly designers admit what a battlefield is really like. It's about the gap between usually enough and enough when it matters. And it's about the people inside the plates. Men who didn't ask for invincibility, only for odds they could work with. So here's my challenge to you. Imagine you were on the design team in the late 1930s, holding the same constraints: weight, cost, speed, doctrine. What would you have changed? First, armor, armament, or the way the vehicle was supposed to be used? Tell me your answer in the comments. And don't just pick a side. Argue the trade-offs. If you were in command, how would you train crews to survive the minutes when a reconnaissance job turns into a firefight? If you were writing the training card for riflemen, what one sentence would you print in bold? If this deep dive gave you a new way to read those angles and millimeters, tap like. It really helps more people find serious, evidence-based history. If you want more World War II episodes told with this level of detail and nuance, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. And share this video with someone who still thinks armor is a single number that answers every question. Because, in the end, our title is not a provocation. It's a lesson. 8 millimeters of steel, angled, riveted, trusted, could still be beaten by rifles. The Sd.Kfz 222 is the proof. And the real armor that saves lives is knowing exactly when, where, and why.